We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. No dark sarcasm in the city. Government, leave the citizens alone. Hey, government, leave them citizens alone. Respect my authority. Tear down that wall, AB. I told you there was going to be a part 2 from yesterday. And here it is. So I'm going to make this as quick as possible. This is just another thing that made me a little bit upset in the city that I live in, that the government forced upon me to do, is tear down a wall, tear down a brick wall. So I live on a dead-end street, and this is actually a Google view of that wall. So as you can see, that's my house there. This brick wall runs all the way, or used to, runs all the way from the back corner of my yard in the backyard, all the way across the street, over to my neighbors across the street. And it runs all the way to the end of his backyard. Well, apparently, the only thing I can really figure out that happened is that one of my neighbors that live on the other side of the fence in my backyard, that attaches to that fence, called the city complaining about this brick wall. The brick wall that was attached, it just stopped. It ended right at the end of my property in the backyard. And it had settled, that part of the wall, probably about 15 foot of it had settled a little bit, and it was leaning into my neighbor's backyard, probably at about a 80-degree angle, okay? It didn't really look like it was just gonna fall over at any time, but it significantly was leaning into the back of their yard. And my wife and I, we knew that, and thinking that possibly at some point we would address it, but the city ended up writing us a letter to myself and my neighbor across the street, telling us that they needed to have a meeting with us to address this brick wall. And there were some areas on the wall that were cracking, stress cracks just settling, from the wall was there from the 80s, and it was built by the contractor that built our subdivision before these people on the other side of that wall, before that neighborhood on the other side of the wall was even built. Because apparently my neighbor's house across the street and my house were the two model homes that they were showing off, in the neighborhood when the neighborhood was being built. And so the developer built this nice brick wall, and it was a nice wall, a really nice wall. It was a single layer brick wall. It was pretty sturdy, pretty dang sturdy. I mean, the columns there didn't really, they didn't really dig down and put a good footing for the columns. So that was a weak point in the whole fence. And that's one of the reasons why it was starting to fail. And a couple of the bricks up on top were coming loose. But this wall went all the way into my backyard. It was about from this here to the backyard, it was about 75 feet, maybe 80 feet. So a neighbor and I had this meeting with the city manager, and again, they sent us a letter saying, hey, we need to have a meeting about your wall because it's in disrepair, and they want us to do something about it. So we had the meeting with the city manager and their attorney, and they were telling us about my side, how it was leaning in, and there were some other cracks there, and trying to get us to rectify it. What they wanted a letter from a structural engineer stating that the wall was in good condition, especially on my side. And I'm just thinking, well, man, okay, so somebody complained, I get it. They sent the code enforcement officer over to the neighborhood, and he backed his truck up to this wall here, and he jumped in the back of his truck, and he looked over the top of my fence just to get a look and see what was going on. At least that's what they said that he did. And of course, they didn't say that somebody complained about it, but that's the only reason I would think that a city code enforcement officer would come over and specifically look at this. So my neighbors across the street, he got an engineer to sign off on his wall because his wall was in good shape. And of course, there was not going to be a structural engineer that was going to say, yeah, that wall's perfectly fine, and probably needs to be torn down and rebuilt. So I was thinking, okay, well, I can probably get to that. We were kind of tight on funds at that time, 2018. But it was the point where they were telling me that, hey, it's not up to you when you're going to fix it. We're going to give you a deadline to where this thing has to be torn down. So pretty much they condemned it like they would condemn a building. And they said that wall is a hazard, and we're going to condemn that wall. So we're going to give you a timeline for you to be able to, it's got to be torn down by this date here. And I'm just thinking, wow, man, that's okay. I also asked the question. I said, well, since y'all have determined that this is my wall, why can't I decide when I want to fix it and negotiate with my neighbors to see if they would like to help fix this wall, so I don't have to carry the whole burden of this? And they said, well, that's up to you, but we have determined that since this neighborhood was here before that other neighborhood was built on the other side, that this is your fence and your responsibility. If your neighbors want to help you, then that's up to them. But they don't have to. We're not telling them that they have to help you. So I thought that was pretty chicken shit. But so I did ask the question. I said, well, what if I just tell the city, hey, leave me alone, screw yourself. I'm not going to do this by your proposed date that I have to get it done, and I'll just do it when I want. And what are you going to do to me if I don't comply? And they said, well, we're going to give you that date, and if it's not completed by that date, then we're going to fine you, $100 a day for every day that it's still up. And if it continues for a certain amount of time, then we can also put a lien on your home and keep that lien on your home till you pay your fines and this fence gets torn down. I just said, well, shoot, man, I didn't have the money to hire a lawyer to fight this. It cost me more to do that than to just tear down the dang fence. So I did. I complied. I said that I would do it. And I did. I had to hire, a company to come to tear it down. I had to have a huge construction dumpster put in my driveway for all the bricks. And when it was all said and done, then of course I had to have somebody come and build the new fence. Of course, I was only responsible for the fence up to this post here, because anything from the sidewalk out to the street, that's city property, actually, from the sidewalk to the street. So that column right there is what I was responsible for, from here all the way to my backyard. And then, of course, the city made this guy back here pay for the fence to go across the street since it was backed up to his house. The city wasn't going to pay for anything. They weren't going to help. So this guy here, and this guy lived in this house. He had to eat, tearing down this wall and putting up another fence on his own dime. And the city didn't even help him. They just told him to do it. Or else they would do the same thing to him as they threatened to do to me if I didn't comply. So when it was all said and done, I mean, we're talking, $4,000 and more, $4,000 plus to do all that work. Now, man, doesn't that kind of leave a bad taste in your mouth? I mean, that's the power that they have. That is definitely the power that they have to mess with you. Well, comply, or we're going to put our thumb on you and we're going to push down. And until you comply with us, that's when we'll let you up. So, but that's the end of that story. I didn't want to keep it really long. I know it's boring. This is probably the last little rant I'm going to do for a while. They are kind of boring stories, but it's just, I just want to put this out there to everybody that, we're really not free. Your property that you own isn't really yours. It's not yours. Even though you may own your home, and you're still going to pay taxes after it's paid off. So I got to go before that chihuahua drives me nuts. Adios, guys.